groups that get together. How is this distinguished from those?
Yeah, I would. I want our audience to know that this is not a sinister gathering of globalists who are plotting to rule the world. It really isn't. There's nothing sinister taking place here. Yes, you have 119 billionaires in attendance.
Right.
119 billionaires are here. A lot of corporate CEOs, a lot of business leaders, but the purpose of them gathering here is really for two things. The original purpose was how can they manage their business better,
Right.
and that grew into how can our businesses make society better, and that's really what they're talking about here. How can they improve? And so this is the press is here. We're here. We're walking around. We have free access. There's no secrecy to
Looking at the Davos Manifesto together with the
It's a big issue there. It's a big issue there. And so there's already some things being discussed. Predictions about where technology is going. We'll be talking about that tomorrow
I
on
heard
True News.
I heard a great session on digital democracy today, Rick. I had some fascinating stuff coming out of that. Can't wait to share some of that information tomorrow as well.
Oh yeah.
So,
Hey, do you guys think we were here 2 years ago, and then last year we were scheduled to be here, and President Trump canceled his visit at the last minute. That's when the government shutdown was
That's
taking
right.
place.
Right.
And remember when Speaker Pelosi, they were going out on the tarmac at Andrews Air Force
They
Base. and-
called the bus back.
Yeah,
Yes.
he wouldn't let them take off, and then the next day he canceled all government travel, and that included
His trip to Davos.
his trip to Davos. So we didn't get to come last year. But does attendance seem down? This is the first day, and maybe it's me. Maybe the first time I was here, I was on such a being here. But today, the first day seems like the last day 2 years ago.
It does seem like attendance. It's easier to get all of
And the
I don't
roads.
see more leaders than we did 2 years ago.
That's right. You were standing at one point in time next to Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel.
And Bill Gates.
Yes, Bill Gates.
Yeah, and 2 years ago, every place you walked, you were standing beside a famous person. was Al Gore, and people got tired of Al Gore's face.
And his failed predictions.
All of his failed predictions. Because by now,
We aren't even supposed to be living in Florida anymore, right?
Let's talk about President Trump. President Trump, he was the man here today. Event revolved around Donald J. Trump. There was nothing else that happened here today bigger than Donald Trump appearing at Davos.
And what do you think about the reception of the president, Rick?
It was restrained but polite. 2 years ago, they hissed.
That's
Yes.
right. They hissed when the president pointed back at the media and some of the globalists as he pointed in his speech. They hissed in response, booed even some.
But
might
they
say.
didn't this time. It was
Yeah.
restrained,
Respectful.
respectful, polite, light applause.
Mainly because last time he was here, he told them what he was going to do, and this time he told them
What he
did.
did. That's right.
So
Yeah, so he gave a rousing defense of his economic policies, and nobody can argue or dispute
they can't.
what has happened to the U.S. economy since Donald Trump has gone in the White House. And we're not going to rattle off all the numbers. In fact, at the end of this True News edition today, we're going to show you in its entirety President Trump's speech here at Davos. So
Yeah,
we
that-
thought it would be better
Yeah.
if we just played the entire speech rather than us cutting back and forth to clips and talking about it.
Right.
There was one marker, just the jobs. The 1.6 million manufacturing jobs that were created. It's something I think people just need to put in perspective on this, Rick, is that's your neighbors. That's regular working families with children that now are going to be able to work, provide, and also develop skills for the future. Those are jobs that were created through Donald J. Trump and his economy.
Over the past 20 years, I mean, all we talked about were American factories leaving.
Right. In fact, he said the president said that in the past couple decades, 60,000 factories. That was a staggering number.
Yes.
That 60,000 factories had left the U.S.
Under
He's-
the administrations of Barack Obama and George W. Bush.
right, and now he said that all those have returned and more since he's been president.
Not the same companies, but
Right.
but the number that there are now
About 12,000 factories. he said.
12,000 new factories that have started in the United States. So, when we were here 2 years ago, do you remember? We got a big kick out of President Trump told all of the World Economic Forum delegates that he was having dinner with the CEOs of Europe's biggest corporations, and he was inviting them to build factories, start offices in America.
And he was naming the numbers and also the commitments. I believe it was into the multi-billions. I believe $30 to $40 billion of investment.
That's right. He had met with them the night before.
Yes.
And so he ticked off the names of the companies that he met with and the commitments that they had made to invest in America.
And he touched on that just briefly, if you noticed in his speech, Rick, where he said, and some of you built your factories in America. He pointed to them. I said, you're sitting here right now.
That's right. So again, 2 years ago when we were here, Donald Trump told them what he was going to do. This time, he told them what he did.
And he also told them that this is the standard. America has set the standard for this, and that the fact that he is focused on building America for America, he's trying to deliver a message to all the nations represented. If you'll build your country, if you'll have the same passion for your country, you can do the same thing.
That's right. And he took a swipe at socialism. He took a swipe at pessimism. And do you think he had anybody in mind?
I definitely think he had a couple people, and maybe one specific young individual, Greta Thunberg, possibly.
Who was in the audience?
Yes, or well, she was standing in the back glaring at the president from the aisles, and unfortunately, the media has not gotten their wish. Their thing they wanted was that President Trump would have a run-in with Greta Thunberg. They were painting it as if it was a showdown between the two. She's a sideshow here. The president was the main event.
That's right. What do you make of his comments about? He talked about the prophets of doom.
The quote is incredible. 'Cause honestly, I think was the biggest part of this speech. He said, "There are perennial prophets of doom, and they're predictions of the apocalypse." And they said that they are heirs of yesterday's foolish fortune tellers. Now, this again is referring to the notion that a country should pay carbon taxes, pay out of profits, pay out of government coffers to offset imaginary climate change, man-made, if that, and somehow that's going to save the polar bears, save the penguins and the bees.
Hey, as we were sitting there, I think this happened just as the president ended his speech. You were handed a document, and at first we thought it was a White House talking points,
Right.
because it was about President Trump's speech.
That was
But
while he was speaking, too.
that's right, while he was speaking, and then you looked at me and said, "No, this isn't from the White House. This is against the president."
It was a hit piece.
So it was a hit piece who was handed to you by a woman who had to be a delegate to be inside, because not everybody got inside.
That's right.
It was limited to who could be in that room with President Trump. So we did some research. Who did you find out she works for?
Well, it appears she works for a Nobel laureate by the name of Joseph Stiglitz. Now, he represents in part progressive socialists, has rallied for big government intervention in both the economy and environmental causes. He decided to create this fact sheet, he called it, as refuting all of President Trump's economic promises.
But Joseph Stiglitz, a Nobel Prize winning economist, is a socialist, I would say a communist, but at the very least, he's a hardcore socialist. He endorsed Jeremy Corbyn for Prime Minister of Great Britain. He believes that we need bigger governments, more powerful governments, less individual freedom.
And how many jobs has he created, Rick?
I think he may have hired an office secretary.
That's one. So
At
he
least
created
one to hand out
one
the
job.
leaflets.
Yeah, to hand out the leaflet.
He did a job there.
That's right. So who do you listen to? A commie economist who's never created any jobs, or do you listen to Donald Trump, who's responsible for the biggest economic boom in the history of America? That's the facts right now. I mean, regardless of how you feel about Donald Trump, you have to look at the numbers. And the economy is booming since he's been in the White House, which makes me ask the question, where would it be had he not wasted 3 years of his time with Nancy Pelosi,
Right.
Russiagate,
and Adam
Robert
Schiff
Mueller.
and all of that stuff that went on for 3 years, and he's still dealing with it with impeachment.
Right. I mean, it would have been so far down the road. And what if he'd had a Federal Reserve that worked with him instead of against him? I mean, it was questions like that. I mean, they're good questions to ask. These are things that have restrained Donald Trump in his presidency.
Did it restrain him, or did it just make him more determined?
Well, definitely, he doubled down in the fight. He never gave up in the fight. He's never given in to these radical Democrats, as you noted. I do wonder if he would have gotten the wall built. I do wonder if he'd gotten more of his economic policy, more factories, for example, being built domestically, job initiatives, these other things he hasn't been able to handle because, again, right now as we speak, he's having to deal with an impeachment, a trial that started in the Senate.
Nothing that the Democrats have thrown at him has stuck. It isn't working. He will be reelected. And the only hope that they have to defeat him is they need the economy to crash in 2020.
Think how
Sadistic that is.
sadistic that is. I mean, that's horrible. In order for your party to win, you have to wait for America to collapse.
They want soup lines.
That's
they
what
want
they
soup
want.
lines in our country.
That's exactly it. By the way, we saw billionaires in a soup line today, didn't we?
We did, yeah. Right after the speech by the president, we were out in the main forum, and someone had set up a little soup kitchen right there in the middle of the lobby area, and there were billionaires lining up for free soup.
That's right. So even billionaires stand in a soup line. Let's talk about the impeachment. Not going to spend a lot of time on it. So the Senate trial actually started today officially, right? And from what I understand, Senator Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, it looks like he has thrown a curveball to Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff. And, he is going to ram through 24 hours of opening statements
In 2 days.
in 2 days.
Right.
Okay, I can do my math. That's 12 hours a day.
Yes.
So are we starting early morning to the
No,
afternoon?
1
or-
p.m.
1 p.m. You're going to start at 1 in the afternoon
Yes, and go 12 hours.
till 1 in the morning?
Yes.
You know, there's a lot of old people in the Senate, and the
Senate.
House, and Representatives.
I think that's his
Oh, they're gonna-
strategy, Doc.
Well, it reminds me of the filibuster. Remember Senator Ted Cruz and Senator Rand Paul and others when they were doing the filibuster on the Senate floor in 2015, 2016, and there were Democrats falling asleep up in the House. Even the press couldn't stay up that late watching and covering this speech.
I think it's a strategy. I think Mitch McConnell is he's pulled a fast one on the Democrats, and he's forcing them. You know what he's saying is, hey, you wanted this trial, you got it. So you're going to be here to 1 a.m.
You take my time, I take your sleep.
That's right, and then we'll be back here tomorrow. We'll do it again. But I really think the whole thing is going to fizzle. It's going to be a big nothing. I really don't think this is going anywhere. It's a colossal flop. The Democrats got their, you know, they drew some blood. They've dragged the president through the mud, but the whole thing is over. They have nothing. They have nothing, and I think it's going to be over very fast. I cannot imagine that the Senate is going to drag this on weeks, months. They just want to wrap it up. And so the Democrats are going to have their 12 hours to present their opening statements. The Republicans are going to have their 12 hours. And then the Senate votes on whether they want to go any farther.
Right.
They could shut it down this week.
Especially since the Republicans have a majority in the Senate.
Yes. So it's possible they could shut it down. Now, if they decide they're going to call witnesses, and that's the thing that
Katie, bar the door. Because
Oh,
you're talking
yeah.
Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, anyone who's actually involved in the very accusation, right, that's being leveled. Because isn't this about corruption? Isn't this about
Absolutely.
Joe Biden pressuring
the worst
state
nightmare
company?
if for the
Ukraine?
Democrats if Joe Biden and Hunter Biden is called into the Senate under oath to testify before television cameras hour after hour for days.
And the president's not sweating this one out. He's here in Davos.
Not at all.
He's doing business, or he's making deals. I mean, he's going to be doing that even tonight before he goes back to the U.S.
He's brushing them off like a big ant at a picnic. That's all they are. That's really what Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats are. There's a big ant at a picnic. You just brush them off your arm,
Right.
and you keep on going. Nothing that they've done has worked, and they'd like to get a civil war going. They'd like to get. They
want gulags.
They need division. They need economic collapse. They need civil unrest. That is so sick.
Those are the major tenets of the Democratic Party.
Yes,
right
the
there.
only way that they can rule is if things go bad.
You got it.
They can't win if things are going good, if things are going right.
Things are going right economically right now, so they can't fight on that. So the only thing they have are imaginary things that they can present against the president.
And thank God nothing happened yesterday in Richmond,
Yes.
Virginia.
Only one arrest in Richmond, Virginia yesterday. And here's the reason why, Rick. True believers in Second Amendment gun rights are peaceful people, they're polite people, they're honest people. They're not people looking for a fight. They're armed. They're not looking for a fight. Okay? But if you want to bring a fight, they're ready. But otherwise, they're peaceful. And that's what the protests were yesterday. Virginia wanted somebody to do something stupid, something
Yes.
idiotic. And
Once
no one
again, the
took the bait.
Democrats. The
Yes.
Democrats were hoping something violent happened in Richmond, and they didn't get it.
Right. So only one arrest out of the, I guess, a little over 10,000 actually showed up on the Capitol grounds yesterday.
And I believe from reading the arrest warrant, it's a young woman who they believe is actually affiliated with an Antifa group, and she was trying to start verbal confrontations.
Is that
with
who they
individuals.
arrested?
Yes, it was.
Because
And
she wouldn't take off her mask.
the bandana, yes. She had a bandana basically she kept putting up around her face and trying to get in verbal arguments with those who were there peacefully assembling, and she was taken away by the police.
What I was concerned about, Rick, was somebody showing up there and, someone from the left side doing something and then making it look like
Sure.
it was someone that was promoting Second Amendment rights.
Absolutely.
But praise God, I know I was praying about the event.
Yes.
Just Lord, just pray for peace in that situation and withhold the hand of violence. That's how I was praying about the situation.
Praise God.
Praise God. for
Well,
that.
the Virginia Democrats are rushing gun control legislation. The Virginia State Senate Judiciary Committee passed 4 bills, sent it to the Senate, and the state Senate has already passed 3 of those 4 bills. I'll tell you what they are. Number 1, a bill to limit the number of gun purchases per month.
Okay.
Number 2, a bill that will criminalize private sales of guns.
So no more gun shows where you can do a
No,
gun
I
owner-
wouldn't
gun
be
owner.
able to sell a gun to you. I wouldn't be able to sell a gun to my son.
Well, how would I sell a gun then? I'd have to sell it to a gun shop. And
I don't know. I don't know how you could under this
How?
law. Number 3, red flag confiscation. Number 4, a bill to empower Virginia local governments, cities and towns, counties, to restrict or ban guns and ammo. Now, 3 of those have passed. The only one that has not passed the state Senate right now is the red flag confiscation bill. But the other 3 have already passed and will be sent to the House, which has a leftist speaker, a new speaker.
Thanks to Michael Bloomberg.
That's right. And so it looks like the Virginia Democrats are determined they're going to pass radical gun control legislation, even bills to confiscate guns. Once again, they're determined to create conflict in our society.
Virginia.
Yes.
It's just hard to believe.
It's what happens when you let leftists get power. They've shown us leftists cannot have power. That ought to just be your rule. Don't let leftists have power.
And the purpose of the Second Amendment was not for us to go deer hunting on the weekends. The purpose of it was to stand up against tyranny. And what you're seeing happening in Virginia right now is legislative tyranny. And that was the whole purpose of the Second Amendment. And so by them restricting it, they're restricting the opportunity to rise up against tyranny.
That's right. Hey, what we're going to do for the rest of today's True News, we're going to show you President Trump's speech in its entirety here at Davos World Economic Forum. Your True News team was sitting in the audience, very close to the stage. We got to see the president up close, hear the entire speech, and we're just honored that we're here. The White House has treated all of the media with a lot of respect and professionalism and courtesy.
I believe we're the only Christian news organization that's covering the World Economic Forum.
I'm certain we are. I don't see any other Christian news organization here. We are honored to be here representing the kingdom of heaven and our King Jesus Christ. And so we are entering into dark places as the news media. And, there's a lot of people in the news media that are very upset about it. There's a lot of people in society very upset that True News is showing up at these places. But it's God's favor on us. Almighty God's favor is on True News. And we thank you, our partners, for supporting us, praying for us, and financially backing us. So, hey, we will be here in Davos all week, and we'll have a new show every day. And what we're going to do right now, we're going to go to President Trump's speech, and then we'll be back here tomorrow. God bless.
God bless you.
It's an honor to address the distinguished members of this organization for the second time as president. When I spoke at this forum 2 years ago, I told you that we had launched the great American comeback. Today, I'm proud to declare that the United States is in the midst of an economic boom, the likes of which the world has never seen before. We've regained our stride, rediscovered our spirit, and reawakened the powerful machinery of American enterprise. America is thriving, America is flourishing, and yes, America is winning again like never before. Just last week alone, the United States concluded 2 extraordinary trade deals. The agreement with China and the United States Mexico-Canada agreement, the two biggest trade deals ever made. They just happened to get done in the same week. These agreements represent a new model of trade for the 21st century, agreements that are fair, reciprocal, and that prioritize the needs of workers and families. America's economic turnaround has been nothing short of spectacular. When I took office 3 years ago, America's economy was in a rather dismal state. Under the previous administration, nearly 200,000 manufacturing jobs had vanished. Wages were flat or falling. Almost 5 million more Americans had left the labor force than had gotten jobs, and more than 10 million people had been added to the food stamp rolls. The experts predicted a decade of very, very slow growth, or maybe even negative growth, high unemployment and a dwindling workforce, and very much a shrinking middle class. Millions of hardworking, ordinary citizens felt neglected, betrayed. They were rapidly losing faith in the system. Before my presidency began, the outlook for many nations was bleak. Top economists warned of a protracted worldwide recession. The World Bank lowered its projections for global growth to a number that nobody wanted to even think about. Pessimism had taken root deep in the minds of leading thinkers, business leaders, and policymakers. Yet despite all of the cynics, I had never been more confident in America's future. I knew we were on the verge of a profound economic resurgence if we did things right. One that would generate a historic wave of investment, wage growth, and job creation. I knew that if we unleashed the potential of our people, if we cut taxes, slashed regulations, and we did that at a level that's never been done before in the history of our country in a short period of time, fixed broken trade deals and fully tapped American energy, that prosperity would come thundering back at a record speed. And that is exactly what we did, and that is exactly what happened. Since my election, America has gained over 7 million jobs, a number unthinkable. I wouldn't say it, I wouldn't talk about it, but that was a number that I had in mind. The projection was 2 million, we did 7. More than 3 times the government's own projections. The unemployment rate is now less than 3.5%, and at 3.5%, that's a number that is the lowest in more than 50 years. The average unemployment rate for my administration is the lowest for any U.S. president in recorded history. We started off with a reasonably high rate. For the first time in decades, we are no longer simply concentrating wealth in the hands of a few. We're concentrating and creating the most inclusive economy ever to exist. We are lifting up Americans of every race, color, religion, and creed. Unemployment rates among African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Asian Americans have all reached record lows. African American youth unemployment has reached the lowest it's ever been in the history of our country. African American poverty has plummeted to the lowest rate ever recorded. The unemployment rate for women reached the lowest level since 1953, and women now comprise a majority of the American workforce. That's for the first time. The unemployment rate for veterans has dropped to a record low. The unemployment rate for disabled Americans has reached an all-time record low. Workers without a high school diploma have achieved the lowest unemployment rate recorded in U.S. history. Wages are rising across the board, and those at the bottom of the income ladder are enjoying the percentage by far largest gains. Workers' wages are now growing faster than management wages. Earnings growth for the bottom 10% is outpacing the top 10%, something that has not happened. Paychecks for high school graduates are rising faster than for college graduates. Young Americans just entering the workforce are also sharing in America's extraordinary prosperity. Since I took office, more than 2 million millennials have gotten jobs, and their wages have grown by nearly 5% annually, a number that was unthinkable. Nobody would have ever thought it was possible 3 years ago. A record number of Americans between the ages of 25 and 34 are now working. In the 8 years before I took office, over 300,000 working-age people left the workforce. In just 3 years in my administration, 3.5 million people have joined the workforce. 10 million people have been lifted off welfare in less than 3 years. Celebrating the dignity of work is a fundamental pillar of our agenda. This is a blue-collar boom. Since my election, the net worth of the bottom half of wage earners has increased by plus 47%, 3 times faster than the increase for the top 1%. Real median household income is at the highest level ever recorded. The American dream is back, bigger, better, and stronger than ever before. No one is benefiting more than America's middle class. We have created 1.2 million manufacturing and construction jobs, a number also unthinkable. After losing 60,000 factories under the previous 2 administrations, hard to believe when you hear 60,000 factories. America has now gained, in a very short period of time, 12,000 new factories under my administration, and the number is going up rapidly. We'll be beating the 60,000 number that we lost, except these will be bigger, newer, and the latest. Years of economic stagnation have given way to a roaring geyser of opportunity. U.S. stock markets have soared by more than 50% since my election, adding more than $19 trillion to household wealth and boosting 401ks, pensions, and college savings accounts for millions of hardworking families. And these great numbers are many things, and it's despite the fact that the Fed has raised rates too fast and lowered them too slowly. And even now, as the United States is by far the strongest economic power in the world, it's not even close. It was going to be close, but a lot of good things happened to us, and some not so good things happened to certain other places. They're forced to compete, and we compete with nations that are getting negative rates, something very new, meaning they get paid to borrow money, something that I could get used to very quickly. Love that. Gotta pay back your loan? Oh, how much am I getting? Nevertheless, we still have the best numbers that we've had in so many different areas. It's a conservative approach, and we have a tremendous upside potential when all of the trade deals and the massive deregulation starts kicking in, which will be during this year, especially toward the end of the year. Those trade deals are starting to kick in already. The regulations are kicking in right now. And I see such tremendous potential for the future. We have not even started, because the numbers we're talking about are massive. The time for skepticism is over. People are flowing back into our country. Companies are coming back into our country. Many of you who I know are coming back in with your plants and your factories. Thank you very much. America's newfound prosperity is undeniable, unprecedented, and unmatched anywhere in the world. America achieved this stunning turnaround not by making minor changes to a handful of policies, but by adopting a whole new approach centered entirely on the well-being of the American worker. Every decision we make on taxes, trade, regulation, energy, immigration, education, and more is focused on improving the lives of everyday Americans. We are determined to create the highest standard of living that anyone can imagine. And right now, that's what we're doing for our workers, the highest in the world. And we're determined to ensure that the working and middle class reap the largest gains. A nation's highest duty is to its own citizens. Honoring this truth is the only way to build faith and confidence in the market system. Only when governments put their own citizens first will people be fully invested in their national futures. In the United States, we are building an economy that works for everyone, restoring the bonds of love and loyalty that unite citizens and powers nations. Today, I hold up the American model as an example to the world of a working system of free enterprise that will produce the most benefits for the most people in the 21st century and beyond. A pro-worker, pro-citizen, pro-family agenda demonstrates how a nation can thrive when its communities, its companies, its government, and its people work together for the good of the whole nation. As part of this new vision, we passed the largest package of tax cuts and reforms in American history. We doubled the child tax credit, benefiting 40 million American families and lifting 650,000 single mothers and their 1 million children out of poverty, and out of poverty quickly. We passed the first ever tax credit for employers who provide paid paternal leave for employees earning $72,000 or less annually, and passed paid family leave for government employees as a model for the country. We made child care much more affordable and reduced or eliminated child care wait lists all across the nation. Our child care reforms are supporting working parents and ensuring their children have access to high quality care and education, all of which they very much deserve. We lowered our business tax from the highest in the developed world down to one that's not only competitive, but one of the lower taxes. We created nearly 9,000 opportunity zones in distressed communities where capital gains or long-term investments are now taxed at zero, and tremendous wealth is pouring into areas that for 100 years saw nothing. The 35 million Americans who live in these areas have already seen their home values rise by more than $22 billion. My administration has also made historic investments in historically black colleges and universities. I saved HBCUs. We saved them. They were going out, and we saved them. We're removing roadblocks to success and rewarding businesses that invest in workers, families, and communities. We've also launched the most ambitious campaign in history to reduce job-killing regulations. For every new regulation adopted, we are removing 8 old regulations, which will save an average of American households about $3,100 per year. It was going to be for everyone, we do 2, but we were able to lift that to 8, and we think that's going to go quite a bit higher. We still have a way to go. Today, I urge other nations to follow our example and liberate your citizens from the crushing weight of bureaucracy. With that, you have to run your own countries the way you want. We are also restoring the constitutional rule of law in America, which is essential to our economy, our liberty, and our future. And that's why we've appointed over 190 federal judges, a record, to interpret the law as written. 190 federal judges, think of that, and 2 Supreme Court judges. As a result of our efforts, investment is pouring into our country. In the first half of 2019, the United States attracted nearly 1/4 of all foreign direct investment in the world. Think of that, 25% of all foreign investment all over the world came into the United States, and that number is increasing rapidly. To every business looking for a place where they are free to invest, build, thrive, innovate, and succeed, there is no better place on earth than the United States. As a central part of our commitment to building an inclusive society, we established the National Council for the American Worker. We want every citizen, regardless of age or background, to have the cutting edge skills to compete and succeed in tomorrow's workplace. This includes critical industries like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and 5G. Under Ivanka's leadership, who's with us today, our pledge to America's workers has become a full-blown national movement with over 400 companies committing to provide new job and training opportunities to already very close to 15 million American students and workers. 15 million. America is making sweeping changes to place workers and their families at the center of our national agenda. Perhaps the most transformative change of all is on trade reform, where we're addressing chronic problems that have been ignored, tolerated, or enabled for decades. Our leaders did nothing about what happened to us on trade. Before I was elected, China's predatory practices were undermining trade for everyone. But no one did anything about it except allow it to keep getting worse and worse and worse. Under my leadership, America confronted the problem head on. Under our new Phase 1 agreement, Phase 2 is starting negotiations very shortly. China has agreed to substantially do things that they would not have done, measures to protect intellectual property, stop forced technology transfers, remove trade barriers and agricultural goods and on agricultural goods where we were treated so badly, open its financial sector totally, that's done, and maintain a stable currency, all backed by very, very strong enforcement. Our relationship with China right now has probably never been better. We went through a very rough patch, but it's never, ever been better. My relationship with President Xi is an extraordinary one. He's for China, I'm for the U.S., but other than that, we love each other. Additionally, China will spend an additional $200 billion over 2 years on American services, agriculture and energy, and manufactured goods. So we'll be taking in excess of 200 billion, could be closer to 300 billion when it finishes. But these achievements would not have been possible without the implementation of tariffs, which we had to use, and we used